Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing a subject that fans have wondered about ever since the Buu saga of Dragon Ball Z. That topic has to do with Goku, and more specifically the question of why didn't Goku use his one-day visit in the future Trunks and original timeline to go back and to defeat the androids and fight them along with possibly other villains that came afterward. Well, I'm going to be breaking that down in depth using the manga and the original storyline that we saw unfold, and discussing with the evidence that was supplied in there. However, before I get into that, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing and enabling notifications so you can stay up to date with all my future videos. Additionally, if you like this content, make sure to leave a like, share your own thoughts down below in the comments, and share this video out so even more people can see this. But with that being said, let's get into the video. So we'll start, of course, with the Trunks' story, the manga variation of the future Trunks timeline events. As we see, many years later after the events of the android showing up, about 14 years in fact, we see that Trunks, that age, is fighting and training against Gohan as a Super Saiyan. In the manga, of course, Trunks learned how to become a Super Saiyan before Gohan's death. At this point, we find out a little bit more about what is going on in the world as a whole. Because after all, there isn't really a lot of information given on screen in the manga comparative to the anime version, because this was only a half chapter that we got in the midst of the Cell saga right before the Cell games, or during it depending upon the release. We talk about here how Trunks is improved and he's very close to overtaking Gohan. However, Gohan is told by Trunks that the Sensu hadn't died out, you could have healed up ages ago, with reference to him missing his left arm. Always the left arm, isn't it, Toriyama? And Gohan says, yeah, it was inevitable that the Sensu would die out, at least I made it out alive, which is referencing how he escaped from the androids. As Trunks said, the androids killed all the Z fighters with the exception of Goku, who died of the heart virus. And then we see right here that Trunks says, Gohan, my mom says that you look so much like your dad in that gi that it startles her. And then Gohan says, that's why I wear it. I hope I can be as strong as my dad before he passed away. But it's not as easy as it seems, which is implying that Gohan here is weaker than Goku when he died from the heart virus, which was likely somewhere maybe a little bit above his power level when he returned from Yardrat, the very same Goku that we saw fighting against Trunks 3 years after this when he travels back in time, or really to the main timeline. This is when the androids attack, and there's no one really there to defend the Earth other than these two at the time. As we see, Gohan powers up to Super Saiyan ready to fight them. Trunks doesn't really want him to do so because he's missing his arm, and also because of the fact that this was kind of a foolish decision that Gohan made in the first place, because really the androids couldn't sense them. They could just kept waiting until they got powerful enough to defeat them. But nonetheless, he knocks out Trunks after distracting him, catching him off guard, which is something we'd see very often in the intercourse series that would follow. And as he says right here, if you die too, there will be no one left to protect the Earth. Someday you'll be the only warrior who can defeat the androids. But why is this the case? Why is it that Gohan is the only one who rushes in to be able to fight against the androids here? And as we see, he's totally outmatched. He's been fighting against them for a very long period of time, it would seem. We don't know how many times he's actually battled them, but we know in the manga continuity, the original one, that he's only referenced to have fought him this one time about a year ago, during which he says that he's been training hard to defeat Android 17, and he'll be able to win. This is during the shocking moment where Android 17 reveals in this situation that last time he was only using half of his strength to fight Gohan. Gohan is shocked because he was actually aiming for that level to surpass, and, you know, as this ends up happening, Gohan is mercilessly killed off screen by 17, you know, and nowhere near the heroic way that he died in the anime special. At this point, Trunks wakes up, he finds Gohan, and he realizes that he's the only one left to be able to take him on, which leads to 3 years later, Bulma is building the time machine so that Trunks can go back in time, and the machine finally has enough power for the round trip that he was planning to use in order to go there and then go back to the future. And, it takes so much time to charge up, 8 months according to Bulma. This is what leads to him, as we could see here, Trunks thinking, I'm strong enough to defeat the androids. Is the trip really necessary? And then Bulma says, you're too naive. Yes, you may have gotten stronger, but have you forgotten the fact that they killed Gohan 3 years ago? Do you really think you've become stronger than he was then? No, Mom, this time it'll be different. Trunks flies off. He gets beaten by the androids off screen as a Super Saiyan. In the anime, we see more of this explained. And then he wakes up, likely because of the fact that the androids purposely spared him, because of the fact that they wanted to keep playing with their food and having fun. And this is where we get the explanation of, was Goku really that strong? Bulma says, yes, he was. But that wasn't all. He was the kind of guy who would give us hope, no matter how dire the situation was. And he decides to go back in time, ready to save Goku's life with the heart virus medication. But really, why was any of this necessary? Why couldn't Goku have done what we see him do later in the story, where he takes the one-day visit? Well, let's actually get into the one-day visit, explain how it works in-universe, with the first example of us seeing it in the original Dragon Ball story way before the Buu saga, when Goku himself uses it, and then why he wouldn't have been able to use it in this situation, or perhaps the reason behind Toriyama deciding not to do it. So let's get into that right now. So the first example we see of a one-day visit is during the Fortune Teller Baba tournament, in which Goku is fighting against the final opponent there, which is his grandfather, Master Gohan. As we see, Grandpa Gohan here is talking to Goku, explaining to him that he had already warned him about his tail. This is when he takes his mask off and he says that it's actually in fact him. And we have one of the most emotional and best moments in the entire story, especially for Goku, where he gets really emotional. He runs up and hugs Grandpa Gohan, basically giving him a Bronco Buster, because he like groin buckles him right in the face when he does this. And we have this great moment right here where even Goku is crying, and he's talking about everything that happens here. At this point, Goku says, so Grandpa, when did you come back to life? And Gohan says, no, it's not that I've been brought back to life. Muten Roshi-sama's honorable elder sister, which is Fortune Teller Baba, as we could see right here, is capable of moving between this world and the afterlife. And so she scouts deceased martial arts masters from the afterlife, paying them a handsome salary to come fight matches for her. Now, I don't quite know what kind of salary they could give somebody in the afterlife, what would really be beneficial to them. But in this case, Gohan likely wanted to just fight his grandson, his surrogate, because of the fact that he wanted to see just how much he was made of, and also to continue to help him along the way. Goku says, in that case, will you come to live with me again? Gohan says, no, that won't work. I'm only able to return to this world for one day. After this, we see that he actually does, in fact, go back to the afterlife, and he just poof, pops right back into that other dimension. Everything all good, well, and done at that point in time. This is what sets up the concept for later on during the Buu saga, in which we see, after 7 years after the defeat of Cell and the androids in the main timeline, what ends up occurring is that Gohan is going to enter into the Tenkaichi Budokai, or the World's Martial Arts Tournament, the strongest under the heavens. At this point, Vegeta challenges him, saying, if you're going to enter, then I'm going to as well. This is because of the fact that Vegeta saw just how powerful Gohan was during the Cell games, and Vegeta himself has been training during that 7-year time skip, saying that there was a huge gap between us, but what about now? While you were living the easy life, I've been training. And even Bulma confirms that's right, training is the only thing he's done for the last 7 years. Your father was the same way. I wonder if all Saiyans are like that. And speaking about that, we have Goku interjecting with King Kai from the afterlife, from heaven, saying, I'm going too. At this point, they recognize his voice and he says, yes, it's me. Long time no see. And we actually see one of the very few scant showcases of heaven on screen in Dragon Ball Z's manga, the Dragon Ball manga in general, which we see expanded a little bit more of in the anime, where it's more of Grand Kai's planet. The concept of heaven and Grand Kai's planet seems to be a little bit different in the manga, but that's a story for another day. But what Goku says is absolutely he's going to show up there. I asked Baba to take me there for my one granted day. the day of the Budokai. If you're going to participate, then I'll definitely be there. The one granted day or the 1 day visit, of course, being a reference to what we saw with Gohan before. And he's been training, he's ready to fight Vegeta, who himself has become really strong, and we see exactly that happen when everyone shows up at the Tenkaichi Budokai, and we see Goku himself shows up in another great emotional scene for Goku and in the early Buu saga. Everyone's acting emotionally, Piccolo's smirking, we even see some people are confused, Trunks is like, who the heck is that? And Android 18, one of my favorite reactions, she's like, oh, this guy, I was supposed to kill this guy. I wonder if I could still kill him even though he's dead. But nonetheless, Goku shows up, and we see just how incredibly powerful Goku became. Because while Gohan and Goten are training leading up to the tournament, and Vegeta and Trunks are training together as well, we see that Goku is training in the afterlife under King Kai during this point in time, training with these big weights that he places around himself and increasing his power more and more as time goes on. And we see the full extent of just how powerful Goku became in the afterlife during this training, which is where we see that during that period of time after the Cell Games, Goku unlocked 2 new forms. He had already mastered Super Saiyan with Gohan training in the Hyperbolic Time Chamber, but during this point in time, he also achieved Super Saiyan 2 just like he saw Gohan achieve, and this is to go even further beyond, which is Super Saiyan 3, a form that makes him 8 times stronger than the Super Saiyan form that he had mastered, and able to fight against even a super powerful enemy like Majin Buu right here, getting the better of him, and seemingly being able to defeat him. But whether or not he actually would have been able to do that is a video I discussed in the top right corner, so I would definitely recommend checking that out. So seeing just how strong Goku became training in the afterlife for the 7 years after the defeat of the androids during which he was dead, it raises the question of why exactly didn't he show up for a 1 day visit, just like he did during this period of time right here, and in turn go and fight and defeat the androids in the history of Trunks, instead of the entire thing occurring where Trunks, where Gohan were fighting against them, where Gohan, his own son, was killed. Like, why didn't Trunks, or why didn't Goku intervene at all in order to fight against these monstrous beings? Especially considering the fact that we know for a fact he wanted to fight them after Trunks told him about them in the main timeline. Did Goku for some reason not observe all these things happening on the Earth? Did he not start to notice when all of his friends and family were showing up in the afterlife along with him? I mean, after all, Goku no doubt would have been granted a body as a hero, and the same thing would have also happened for Gohan, who died a heroic death after saving the Earth and the universe fighting against Frieza. The same thing with Piccolo and all of the other fighters who did their best to fight against these androids, who fought against Frieza, who had retained their bodies after their death against the Saiyans. None of them really should have gone to hell. These are not demons, so as a result, their souls would not be lingering on the Earth. It just seems like the afterlife almost kind of disappears in this storyline. And that's not all, because even after the androids in the History of Trunks storyline, there's another enemy that shows up that's even more powerful and causes even more problems. So let's get into that. And that enemy is, of course, Goku Black and Zamasu, an enemy who stole Goku's body from a different timeline, in fact, and was using it to ravage the Earth in this dimension. Not just that, but additionally, this led to such a drastic conflict between him, especially after he merged with his alternate timeline counterpart, that this led to Zeno, the god of creation or the god of all existence, at least at this point until they introduce other beings above him, which I'm sure Toriyama will do eventually, wiping out not just Zamasu, but also the entire timeline itself, which isn't just the Earth, which isn't just the universe, but also the entire multiverse and macrocosm of existence in there, all of the dimensions, all the way up to the, I don't know, I guess the 10th or whatever you could say in this Dragon Ball storyline, where we even see the ring itself being obliterated right here and now. And so that consequence right there was vastly greater and also vastly worse for Trunks and those characters, and also the storyline and Trunks the character beyond just the in-universe aspects, which I talked about in the top right corner. And once again makes you wonder, After all these years of no doubt training in the afterlife with King Kai, why didn't Goku or really any of the other Z fighters show up, maybe teaming up together, all taking a one-day visit at the same time to fight these enemies and make it so the entire timeline didn't get obliterated, which would include the afterlife and in turn mean that all of their souls, all of the afterlives, everything were ceasing to exist at the very same time, which is an even more dark and nihilistic ending than a lot of people like to think about. Now, one of the reasons why many people like to say or try and argue comes down to the fact that they believe that Goku, because he died of the heart virus, was inherently not actually able to keep his body. Now, this is never something that is actually said in the story, and if we include the Dragon Ball Super continuity, specifically the manga, Toyotaro actually wrote a special chapter where he talks about how the androids originally attacked in the original and History of Trunks timeline, and we see right here that after Goku died, it even says in the narration that Toyotaro wrote, in case you don't remember, Goku had already died of the heart disease at this point. We see Goku here floating, "Hi, I'm dead right now," which is kind of funny, I have to say, even in a very morbid way. We see the androids attacking and killing everyone, Gohan escapes, and then in turn he goes to try and wish to save Piccolo. However, what ends up happening is that, the Pilaf gang uses the Dragon Balls to make themselves young, and Piccolo, as we could see down here, well, he dies too, meaning the Dragon Balls will never be able to be used here again, except for on New Namek, which I guess they completely forgot about because, again, another plot contrivance. So there's zero indication that Goku would have not kept his body. The only restriction that there would be with regard to him dying of natural causes is that he wouldn't be able to be wished back with the Earth Dragon Balls. That's the only Dragon Ball set also that we're told about that wouldn't be able to wish him back. They never make that distinction, as far as I can recall, with the Namekian Dragon Balls. So again, they definitely had the opportunity for Goku to be able to use the one-day visit, and even if we discount Goku and we say he wouldn't be able to come back, and maybe it was like the Buu Saga where, well, I'm going to let the next generation fend for themselves, even though they did a terrible job and died. The fact of the matter is that all the other Z fighters, like future Gohan, no doubt would have wanted to come back and help Trunks. They wouldn't have just abandoned Trunks to do whatever he wanted, so all of them, like I said before, would have kept their body. And after years and years of training in the afterlife with dead spiritual bodies, perhaps even under King Kai and the Grand Kai and other beings that exist in the afterlife, why wouldn't they be so powerful that they could effortlessly curb stomp the androids and defeat them much easier than even Trunks did at the end of the Cell Saga? You think that it would be cakewalk. Same thing with Zamasu. They wouldn't need to erase this dude. They would have all been able to show up, and that probably would have been a vastly better ending, even though it still would have been a plot hole, because why didn't they do that earlier? But they could have just written one line of dialogue, "Oh, we're not allowed to interfere until right now because it threatened the entire timeline." Very easy, done, boom, right then and there. You can even make the argument that other beings from other afterlives and dimensions could have shown up and fought against Zamasu. Like, what about, I don't know, Jiren and all these other beings who were dead at the time that could have had a one-day visit from their own universes? Do you mean that Universe 7 and only one being, Fortune Teller Baba, is the only one that could bring them back? Doesn't really make sense when you really think about it and apply that to the entire future Trunks storyline, whether it be in Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball Super. So I think a lot of this might come down to Fortune Teller Baba herself. In universe, perhaps the only reason I can really think of as to why they didn't get the one-day visit comes down to Baba. It's entirely possible that the androids actually killed Fortune Teller Baba during the rampage on the Earth when they're wiping out most of humanity and all of the powered fighters. Maybe Dr. Gero, when he was using the spy bots in order to track all of the movements of Goku up until Namek, he also found out about the one-day visit because he saw Goku fighting against Grandpa Gohan, and this did happen immediately after the Red Ribbon Army, so that's probably when Goku would have started to be tracked by the androids, by Dr. Gero, by the spy bots, and thus in turn, he might have seen Baba as one of the biggest enemies for the androids to wipe out, so it's possible that they killed off Fortune Teller Baba. Another thing is perhaps that Fortune Teller Baba thought it was too big of a threat for her to remain on the Earth, and then in turn just refused to go back because she didn't want to die. Another thing too is that because we find out in the Buu Saga that characters, if they die again, are erased from existence, perhaps it's possible that the Z fighters, not being able to sense the androids, never knew just how powerful they would really be at their full power, and then in turn would not be able to defeat them because the fact that, or they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to defeat them because the fact that, they thought, well, if we go there and we die again, we'll be dead forever. Unless in turn, that could end up, just backfiring in a massive way. I feel like that the Z Fighters were selfless enough to where they would risk that chance. Vegeta himself did that, and he was, at that point in the story, one of the most selfish Z Fighters in general. So I could definitely see someone like Gohan or even Krillin, Tien, and a lot of these characters, especially if we're using super continuity where they get massive power-ups all the time, could have been able to just say, you know what, we're going to risk it. Let's go to the Earth Baba. Let's blow all these androids away, and let's save everyone, and then be able to, I don't know, communicate with King Kai and then communicate with the new Namekians and wish ourselves back. It really would have resolved pretty much everything almost right away, especially if Goku was anywhere near as powerful as he was here. Remember, Goku would have had about 14 years worth of training, probably even more, because we don't know exactly when Goku died in the manga continuity with the heart virus. It could have been, 1 year after Trunks originally showed up in the main timeline and the unseen timeline. It could have been, right before the events of the android showing up. Nonetheless, we know that he died during that 3-year gap, which is sooner than he would have died theoretically in the main timeline had he not taken the medication. And so, even though Goku at that point wouldn't have, had knowledge of mastering the Super Saiyan or getting Super Saiyan 2 or 3, he didn't see Gohan do that. With 14 plus years of training, it's certainly possible to suggest that Goku could have achieved these forms. Same thing with Gohan with 3 years of training in the afterlife, and even more time, especially come the events of Zamasu, which is kind of an ambiguous amount of time afterward, which they go out of their way not to explain to us, but, somewhere within that, 10-year time skip period, I guess. The fact of the matter is that at this point, that should mean that they were far more than powerful enough to wipe out the androids then and there and put a stop to their threat if they actually made this one-day visit, assuming that Fortune Teller Baba was alive, that Enma the King Yema, would have been able to allow them to return, and really, everything lines up to where it should have happened. It just didn't. So what is the main reason for this happening? Let me get into my conclusion right now. So in universe, there isn't really any evidence explaining why Z Fighters like Goku and the others did not show up for a one-day visit and defeat all the androids then and there. They definitely should have had the power to do so. They definitely had the means to do so. However, I think that most of it really comes down to what I mentioned before. Maybe Baba was killed. Maybe for some reason King Yema wouldn't allow it because they'd be interfering too much with reality rather than Goku just going to a fun tournament, and the same thing with Gohan. Or perhaps something else, which is the out-of-universe reason, is that at this point in the story, Toriyama wanted to tell a very dark story that was with really gritty, realistic stakes where death actually mattered. Piccolo died, the Dragon Balls on Earth were gone, the Z Fighters, were all killed off in a way to where they just stayed gone. It was a very grim, dark reality, very akin to the Terminator or Days of Future Past, another, post-apocalyptic dystopian series in which the main characters were defeated one after another, and only one character who kind of embodied hope was the one to inevitably go back in time using that kind of plot device that Toriyama wanted to implement in order to defeat everyone. And so as a result, ideas like the one-day visit, the new Namekian Dragon Balls, and so on were not really included. Even though you could make the argument that the Z Fighters would not have been able to find New Namek because they had no idea where it was and they needed King Kai. But again, King Kai could have easily just shown Goku or the others in the afterlife. They could have communicated that to, the people on the Earth, just like King Kai did that for Master Roshi when he was going to bring back those who had died on Earth, like Goku in this case to fight Vegeta, or Kami was being, using the Dragon Balls with Mr. Popo to bring back Guru and everyone on Namek. So they definitely could have done all this in universe, but I think it was more that Toriyama wanted to kind of ignore those ideas so that in turn he could present a very different storyline, which honestly, if you overlook these things, ends up being one of, if not the best storylines in the entire franchise because of those stakes, because of how dark it is, because of how it takes and subverts all of the expectations, or really all of the build-up and everything that we'd seen prior, and shows us exactly what a dark direction things can go in if Goku isn't there, and so aren't the Dragon Balls either. But with that being said, guys, what do you think? Let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Do you think that this is a plot hole? And whether or not it is, do you think that this is something that Goku Goku would have been able to do? If so, why not? Let me know down there. Also, if you're new to this channel, again, consider subscribing and enabling all notifications so you can stay up to date with all my future videos. Like the video if you like it, share it with your friends, and make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.